thank you all very much indeed for coming along. I think we're just about outnumbering everybody with staff here today. And it's often the way, actually, with the annual plan process, that we do a lot of meetings over the whole of the city, different suburbs across the peninsula, and depending on what's cooking, you get either a very large turnout around one particular issue, or often you almost get just complete apathy. So it's great to see you all here and that you're interested enough to turn up, because for us this is an incredibly important part of our annual process. And this year, to give you a feel for the scale of what's involved, our budgets for the last few years have probably sat at around about 650 million, Tony, as an annual budget. And about a third of that, roughly a third of that, is what comes out of rates. So the rest of that money is money that we get through our investments, through the holding company, CCHL, and that normally returns us in the order of around about $35 million a year. I can always look over there for Paul Anderson. Paul is effectively our Chief Financial Officer. He has another title within the organisation, but that's the easiest way to think of him. Tony Marriott, our Chief Executive. Paul and Tony are very much responsible for doing the initial setup for the budget, but of course it involves the entire organisation. And the other part, let's say the other major part of the money in our budget, really is coming from either the subsidies that we get around roading, and of course this year there's a significant influx of money from insurance, government, and our overall budget this year is over 1.4 million from memory, 1.4 billion, sorry, yeah, 1.4 billion, so it's roughly double what we would normally be doing. And in the midst of all of that, Tony recently signed, along with a number of the other chief executives from organisations involved in the recovery process, the biggest civil contract that we've ever signed in New Zealand for $2.2 billion. And that's for the horizontal, we call it the horizontal infrastructure, the stuff that fascinates councils and is pretty boring for everybody else, the water, the wastewater, and the stormwater systems that run under the roads. So this year in the draft budget we are proposing a fairly steep increase of around about 7.5% in our long-term plan, and these numbers probably 5 years ago where council tended to be sitting every year, it was sitting around 7 to 8 to 9%. And we pulled that back significantly about 4 years ago, and we managed to get an average increase looking ahead over the 10-year plan of around about 4% per annum. So this is a significant bump up on that, and that's why it's very important that this year, because essentially this is your budget, our budget, that we get your feedback. But the major components of that budget are, if you like, the business as usual part. So that was the sort of part we were expecting, and that's around about 3.5% increase. And then on top of that we've got two other charges. One of those is already in place, and that's around about a 1.74% increase, which we brought in last year. It goes in every year for 5 years, and that's really to give us the cash to pay for our part of that horizontal infrastructure, if you like, that rebuild process there. And this year we're also putting in, or suggesting, a one-off 2% rate increase. And that is really to contribute to the funding that we require for the capital projects. So the major facilities, if you like, the big things like the inner city stadium, the rebuilding of some or part or all of QE2, depending on the process that we go through in the weeks ahead, the new convention centre, and a number of those central city projects are also going to be influenced by what happens with the new Central City Development Unit, which is tasked with the job of rebuilding or initiating the rebuilding process inside the 4 avenues. But from our point of view, we're still consulting on those, The reason for that is that a significant portion of the funding of those projects go ahead will come from ratepayers, although the final location is something we're also very interested in getting your input around. We do have to also add that now with the Central City Development Unit, there will be another conversation around any decisions that we finally make around location. Now those locations, there are only so many locations, frankly. I think we've probably got most of them highlighted. But one of the potential impacts of the Central City Development Unit is the government reserves the right under that legislation to say, well, we might have decided as a council that we should put a convention centre back exactly where the old convention centre was. But government, through the Central City process, may actually say, on the basis of the work that we have done, we actually would like to put it on the site on Victoria Square, for example. So those are some impacts, but it doesn't impact on the fact that we're going to put up a significant amount of funding as a community. So we think that those two bumps, 1.7 that we put in, was it 1 year ago? Or 2 years? No, it's only 1 year ago. We did it after 2010, didn't we? So we put it in 2011. Plus the 2%, just a one-off 2%. They do, of course, lift the baseline, so their effect runs on into the future. In 5 years' time, thereabouts, Council could make a choice to drop back some of those fundings, but given the way that generally our aspirations as a community tend to continue to grow rather than shrink, it's not so likely that they would disappear. But a council at a future time would actually have that option. So those are the key factors in the rating process. The process for us is that we would very much like people to put in their written submissions, and one of the reasons that we're asking preferably for written submissions is that we'll probably get a lot of people on particular issues coming to us this year, and the hearings, as it is, we've got about 4 or 5 days already scheduled in there. It certainly helps us if, rather than getting a large number of people who come in and deliver exactly the same message a great number of times, if we can actually get them in writing. Because our goal is to work through all of the submissions to each councillor. We'll weight them according to their understanding and their feeling around the propositions that are put forward. And then council as a whole will make a decision, and we'll strike the rates on the 1st or for the 1st of July. So it's for the next 12-month financial year. Now I should also mention that normally by law this year we would be required to do what we would call a long-term plan. That's the 10-year planning document. Because of the earthquakes and because of the scale of the work that we have to put into place, we've been able to legally delay that for 1 year. But alongside the annual plan, which is really just a 12-month budget, we've also got some other major projects that I've mentioned before. Some of these major facilities, they actually do have an impact on the long-term plan. So the dates for the process are up there. You can see that we'll be meeting to, finalise the deliberations toward the end of June, so we leave it as long as we can. So we're actually into the consultation phase at the moment. The public hearings I mentioned before, you can submit in writing, you can come down yourself, or actually you can do both if you feel so inclined. And we think probably there'll be a couple of big issues for us to work our way through this year. Pretty certainly the issue around rates rebates I think is a hot potato, and that'll be a discussion that we're expecting to have a lot of submissions on and to work our way through as part of the annual plan. We're expecting around some of the facilities that there'll be a number of different arguments as to where they should go. And for anybody who is from the east here, one of the big debates, of course, has been around QE2 and what will happen with QE2, and should it be rebuilt essentially as it was, or does it modify into something different? I think the one message that we've consistently sent out to people in the east is that We understand the loss of facilities, and we understand the very real importance of ensuring that the east of the city is well served by community facilities, and at the very least we'll be back into the east with a significant complex of some kind. The debate is just around, I guess, how significant that should be. But of course we're also faced with some other very expensive tasks, and they are ensuring that we get new infrastructure out to the sped up new residential subdivision areas. So major work going on in the southwest of the city around Wigram, and a lot of land that's been brought forward, already within the urban development strategy, already slated for residential, but wasn't expected to come on for maybe 10, 15, 20 years. All of that has been brought forward, and that does have a big impact on our collective community budgets, because part of the reason for the urban development strategy was that we could get a process to time when we brought land in. And the reason that we wanted to do that, increasingly we're on fixed incomes as we generally become an older age group community. We wanted to ensure that future generations would have a plan that would limit the expense and exposure for putting infrastructure in, and rather than have the development community opening up new, I guess, fronts, we would call it, all around the city, it was more affordable for us collectively to be able to say, well, look, we'll move here, then we'll move there, then we'll move there, to give some certainty, but also to ensure that we could contain the costs. Right now we're advancing other urban developments around the Belfast area. Of course, there's stuff around the Prestons Road area, and a number of other potential areas which we will have to put infrastructure in. And so that comes with an additional cost, and that's an issue that we have to watch very closely indeed. So that's an overview of the process. Again, thank you for coming down. Thank you for choosing to be involved. I should also introduce that we've got Peter Beck, one of our councillors over here. Any other councillors? I can't see any others here, so we'll just move into this process. I might ask Tony if you want to come up and perhaps introduce it from your perspective.